Hey everyone, it's Heather with Tiller here. Thanks for joining me for our special tax time webinar to share how to use Tiller to get organized for your taxes. All right, so today let me see why this is not working. Sorry about that. I'm just having a delay with my presentation here. So today I'll be doing a demo to show you how to manually add historical transactions to your Tiller spreadsheet. If you haven't been using Tiller, for the last entire year for 2022, you may need to manually add some historical data to see that full year of data. So I'll be going through the steps for how to do that in both Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel. And then we'll talk through how to get your data organized once it's in the spreadsheet so that you can then leverage that data for your tax reporting. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of the session, but you can post your question at any point during the session, just as it comes to mind. Go ahead and use that Q&A button to get your question into the Q&A, and then I'll take those questions toward the end after I've completed the demo. And then lastly, you'll get an email tomorrow with some resources that will include a link to the video recording of the session, as well as a few other help articles and things like that. So we will go ahead and dive in here. All right, so let's stay signed in there. Okay, so here on the Tiller console, this is where I can see which spreadsheets that I have linked. And so in the demo here, I'm demoing from the perspective of someone who's been using Tiller for a little while, but perhaps hasn't been using it for the entire year of 2022. So I don't have all of that 2022 data in the spreadsheet. I've got both a Google Sheet linked and an Excel spreadsheet linked just so I can demo on both platforms, because I know we have users of both platforms. And so I've got accounts linked. I've got many months of historical data, but I don't have the full year of 2022. So I will go ahead and start in the Google Sheet version. And the way I hope to do the demo is to do the Google Sheet, a few steps, switch over to Excel, do a few steps, and kind of go back and forth. So depending on what platform you're using, all the steps won't be applicable. So just try to keep listening and watch as I go through the steps on the platform that you're using. So for Google Sheets here, we can see that in this particular spreadsheet, my demo user here has data going back to March of 2022. So in order to see all of the data for 2022, which, I need to do my tax reporting on all my data from last year, I'm going to need the rest of the year. So I'm going to need January, February, and then about half of March. Then I'm going to have to add manually to the transaction sheet. So for whatever accounts where you have tax reporting, or if you want to get all of it in there just for consistency, you'll need to log into those particular accounts at the financial institution. So I just have my Chase credit card open here just to kind of demo it in Chase. Every banking institution is going to be different. So not all these steps are going to be exactly the same depending on your financial institution. They'll probably be a little bit different. But here on Chase, I get this option down here under the account activity to download account activity. And then I can change this, the date range here of the dates that I want to pull the data. I can choose a specific account, and then we're going to want to use a spreadsheet type, which some may just be, may just say CSV, but definitely either Excel, CSV, or spreadsheet type is the type of export that we're going to want here. And so for each of those accounts, you might have to do an individual export for each account, making sure that you're getting the appropriate date range that you need, and then you can just go ahead and download it. So once again, that's going to be different depending on your financial institution. I've already got the sheet downloaded that I want to use for the demo. And so I'm going to locate that here on my computer. It's going to be this Chase activity. And in the download, I just got all of last year rather than I didn't choose a specific date range. So in the case here, I'm actually just going to clear out any of the data that I don't need. And so if you'll remember, I'm just missing data from about, March 13th and onward for 2022. So I'm going to clear out everything that I've already got, basically. So that's going to be these specific rows. So I'm going to delete those. And I'm doing this in Microsoft Excel because the export was a CSV, and that just is the default program that opens on my computer. So now I've got these columns here, right? This is the data that I got from Chase for this particular account. And I don't actually need all of these columns. The important thing here, now that I've just got the transactions that I need to actually add into my Tiller spreadsheet, the next step is to decide what of this data do I actually need, review the spreadsheet, my Tiller spreadsheet, to see what the column order is, and then just kind of make a mental note. And so I can see here in my Google Sheet, if I just scroll all the way back to the top here, I've got date in column B, description in column C, category in column D, and amount in column E. And I think those are the only ones that I need to remember, and just making a mental note that column A here is just like a blank column. So if I go back, now I need to sort of rearrange the columns, the data, to make it match the transaction sheet, because I'm going to copy and paste it. And so pre-arranging it in this export is going to help tremendously when I do that copy paste. So the column A was blank, so I'm just going to clear that. I prefer to have the post date. The example data that I get from Chase gave me the transaction date as well. It doesn't really matter to me which date I use. If that's important to you, you can choose either one. Tiller is going to automate the date. Usually it's the post date. Sometimes it's the transaction date. It really varies by institution. So wouldn't worry about it too much. The main thing is that column A was blank in the Tiller transaction sheet. So now I've got date in column B, that's expected. Description in column C, that was also expected. Category in column D, I'm actually going to clear this out because I don't want to use Chase's categories, but I'm going to leave the blank column here so that when I paste it, it's in the appropriate order. I'm going to delete column E, the type here, because there is no type column. I don't need that data. Column E was amount, and then I'm going to delete this memo column. So now I'm just going to double check. So column B is date, column C is description, column E is amount. So if we go back to the transactions here, B is date, C is description, E is amount. So it looks like we got that right. So back in the export here, I'm just going to copy the data that I need to paste in. I'm not going to copy in row 1 because I don't need those headers. I just need the actual data. So I'm just doing a Control C here. I can also right click and choose copy. So I've got that data copied onto my clipboard. Back in my Google Sheet here, I'm going to start in the first empty cell in the date column, because the first piece of data I'm going to be pasting in is a date. And I'm going to do a right click, paste special, values only. And of course that doesn't work. I'm not sure if it's something between like pasting from Excel. I tend to always see that this happen. Let me try one more time. Yeah, for whatever reason, when I try to paste from Excel, it does not paste it with the values only. But if I just do a normal paste, then it works. These, I think it's like giving me some issues with the formatting there. Let me see if I can get this to work a little better. Paste. Yeah, still doesn't paste. Odd. So I've got that blank column there. For whatever reason, when I try to paste in here, it's like merging this cell. I'm not sure why that's happening. Let me try to unmerge it. Nope. Of course, my demo is going to go awry here. Okay, so let me try on a blank Google Sheet here. So for whatever reason, yeah, it's merging those. Oops, not what I wanted to do there. Definitely shouldn't be this hard. In the steps that we have on our help center, I think it recommends like adding the CSV to your Google Drive, and then I think it's easier to kind of like massage the data, the things that I did in the Excel workbook. I think that this should work. Basically, it just, for whatever reason, was like merging these two cells. I'm not sure why. Maybe there's some Excel whiz out there. I mean, they're definitely not, it's like a distinct column here. So I'm not really sure why that went wrong, but I think that cleaned it up, just unmerging those cells individually. Definitely recommend for, pasting into Google Sheets, probably the steps that we have on the Help Center where it's talking through like uploading the CSV to your Google Drive and then doing the column reordering and cleaning up the data before you paste in is probably going to resolve that issue. So just make a note of that. That'll come in the resources that you will get tomorrow. So now I think when I paste values only, that seems to have worked. So now I've got the data in for that credit card for all of the months before, that basically was missing before March 14th in 2022. And so I have one more account that I'm going to paste the data in. So once again, you may have to do this for a few different accounts. I'm actually going to demo, because I'm also going to paste that into Google Sheets. I'm going to demo those steps where we shouldn't have this issue of like the copy paste not working. So if I go to drive.google.com, and this is what you'll find documented on our Help Center. This is the checking account. And so the steps on our Help Center, you can drag a file here into your Google Drive, and then I can go ahead and open this in Google Drive. And I don't need to take a tour here. So I'm going to do the same thing. This one doesn't have as many extra columns. It's got all of that March data for the bank or the credit union. I just exported the specific date range that I needed. So I'm just going to clear column A because it's blank. And then I need to add a column D here. So I'm going to insert one left. So that's going to leave a space for the category column in the transaction sheet. And then that's it. I don't have to delete any other columns, rearrange things, and so on. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this data. So Control C, and then we should find that this pastes a bit better. So we can once again do that Control paste special values only. Why is it not? I guess not. Copy. Nope. That seemed to work and it didn't merge it. I'm not sure why that paste specials values only is not behaving. But anyway, I got the data in there, starting with March for that check one account. So that's this account, right? So I can go ahead and I can fill in that data. Probably should have shared the step before I pasted in the data of that other account. I don't want to do the quick, like the fill handle, just going to paste it in like that, because if I had used this fill handle, see, it will enumerate these numbers, and I don't want that because I need it to just be this one, and then this other one was this chase. So now I'm just filling in this extra data, which can be handy for the tax reporting stuff if you need to do any filtering based on a specific account. Otherwise, you don't have to fill this extra data in. The other thing is, it's not completely necessary to, in this example, to fill in the month or week data. You're not going to have transaction IDs, which is what this column is. I'm actually going to freeze this so we can kind of go back down here and look. So we've got the manual data. We did fill in the account and institution and account number. Once again, not going to have transaction IDs because that's generated by Tiller. The month and week data in the demo I'm doing here for the tax reporting, you don't necessarily need those, but the steps on the help article do include how to get that data into the historical, for the historical data if you want it. So those are the steps for getting the historical data into Google Sheets. So now we can do the same steps in Excel. So it's the same exact thing. I'm gonna we've already got this set up correctly, so I don't need to go through those steps again, but I do want to share same thing. So it ends at the same date. Same basic process. So I'm just going to grab the data here. It's already in the right order, and then I can go ahead and just paste it in. And then you can see it extends the table boundary, which I can tell because I've got the, variation in the colors of the rows. Same thing with the other one. I'm going to open this one in Excel this time. Wait, this one already had open, this one. I don't need this transaction date. I'm just going to clear that out. I'm going to insert for the category column. And I'm going to just select all the data. I'm just holding shift to, you just click this first cell here, hold shift, and then click into the last cell. And that allows you to select all the data you want to copy. Control C. And then over here, I can just do a Control V. Sorry, I'm used to doing Command Shift V, which is the paste special values only, but if you just do a normal paste, it should work. Oops, I skipped a step. Right? What did I do wrong here? I needed to add the column for the category. So there we go. Okay. So copying again and pasting again. There we go. Now we've got it in the right order. So same thing. I can do this thing moved out of the way. Something. Okay, there we go. So this is for the check one. I can tell because it starts here. Same thing. I can just, copy in the data that I want here. I'm not worried about month. And then this was the Amazon Prime Visa. So just a lot of copy paste to get the data ready. Okay, the last step in both of these is to just sort by the date column, and you can do Z to A descending, and it's going to resort everything back into its proper order where it belongs chronologically. So now we've got all of the data for 2022 in our transactions spreadsheet. And so once again, you may have to do those steps for multiple accounts. If you don't need to do sort of line item deduction reporting on all of your accounts, then you don't necessarily need to add all that historical data if you don't want to. It's helpful if you want to have more analysis, not for tax stuff, but really the main thing is just making sure that you do the accounts where you have some line item deduction reporting that you need to do. So back in our Google Sheet here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sort Z to A. Anytime you make a change that's going to affect row one, you're going to get this heads up warning, and it's just to protect row one so you don't accidentally blow away any of these headers. If you don't have the filter turned on in your transaction sheet, you can easily turn that on. Right now I have it on, so if I click this button, it'll remove the filter. I think by default, the transaction sheet does not have the filter turned on. And so once again, if you just click this square rectangle up here in the upper left above row one to the left of column A, it's going to select all the data in your sheet, which is important if you're going to be filtering. And then you can click this create a filter button here in the toolbar. You can also do it from the data menu, create a filter, but you just click this, and then now you can filter and sort based on the different columns in your sheet. So we've got all the data in the sheet now for 2022. What is next? The next thing is to spend time categorizing that data. So we don't know what the line item deduction items are if they're not categorized. And so, I have some stuff that's uncategorized for 2023, but I'm not going to focus on that right now because I'm really just focused on getting my data prepared for tax time for 2022. So I have everything from 2022 categorized up until the point of those that I had to manually add. So, I've been in this scenario, I've been using Tiller for a long time, and I've got most of that data already categorized. Now, if you're new to Tiller, you may have a lot more to categorize. So just spend time going through and categorizing transactions. You can do it manually using the drop-down menu. You can see here, this is pretty easy. This is groceries, this is gas, miscellaneous like shipping. That's gas as well, groceries. So I can easily do it just by typing the first few letters of a category into the drop-down there, and it'll help me quickly fill it in. I can also use AutoCAD to help. I can build a rule set. And so I'll demo this quickly, just kind of explain it quickly, both for Google Sheets and for Microsoft Excel. And so AutoCAD, if you don't have it yet for Google Sheets, you can get it from the Tiller Money Feeds add-on. So if you go to the extensions menu at the top of your Google Sheet, Tiller Money Feeds is down here near the bottom of the extension menu. And then you can choose launch. And it's just going to load the sidebar here. And so if you don't have AutoCAD installed already, you can click this AutoCAD option here on the right-hand side, and it will prompt you to install AutoCAD. Once you already have it installed, it's going to show you the rule builder and you can run it from here. And so I already have some rules built. And so we should see that some of these transactions will get categorized. So if I just go ahead and run AutoCAD, let's see what it picks up. All right, so you can see it went ahead and categorized some of these where I have rules. So for example, groceries, I have a rule that is identifying if the description contains, I believe it's earth fare, then it will categorize it as groceries. And so just to demonstrate that here, I can see the second rule here, categorize as groceries if the description contains earth fare or Ingles or Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or Hendersonville. This is like for the co-op here. And so this is like a multi-criteria rule, which basically you're just putting the keyword in quotes and separating them by commas so that you can OR together multiple keywords. So you can build one rule for multiple merchants. And so that's part of where it picked up, you know, the groceries here at Ingles, just from that one rule. So we can see that it went through and got quite a lot of transactions and categorized them for us. So there's still some work to do there for categorizing transactions. I'm not going to go through and categorize all these. I think, you know, just for the demo purposes to try to keep it short and sweet, but that is the next step, is to go through and categorize the transactions so that you have all of that data available when we start working through how to actually leverage the data for your tax reporting. And so briefly here in Excel, same basic steps. You know, we've got everything that we had for 2022 already in the sheet categorized. And then the next step is to just spend time categorizing the transactions that are not already categorized that we manually imported. And so once again, groceries, same kind of thing. Excel will pre-fill if you've already got the category in use above in the column or somewhere in the column. If you haven't used that category before, I think you have to actually select it from the dropdown. So just some platform differences between Google Sheets and Excel. Similarly, you can also use AutoCAD in the same way in Microsoft Excel. And so if you don't have it installed from your data tab here, data ribbon in Excel, you can open Tiller Money Feeds. If you don't see it in the data ribbon, you can always find it from my add-ins here, and you can access it that way. And so if I didn't have AutoCAD already installed, it would give me the option to install AutoCAD instead of run AutoCAD. And so I could click that and it would add the AutoCAD sheet. It may be off somewhere to the right if you doesn't activate it right now when you install it. So just keep in mind, if you do install AutoCAD, it's going to be a new tab out to the right somewhere down here at the bottom where your tabs are. And then I have the same rule set for my Google Sheet in this Microsoft Excel sheet. And so if I go ahead and run it, we don't have a rule builder for Microsoft Excel just yet. We hope to have one in the future, but you can see once I ran it, it let me know that it completed with updates. And then I see that some of these transactions were categorized. Doesn't seem to have gotten my Ingles. I thought it would. Oh, I think I left a quote out here. So that was like a malformed rule. So if I do run AutoCAD again, didn't get any updates. I'll have to check into that why I didn't get these Ingles one as groceries. So use AutoCAD to help you categorize transactions to get everything categorized for 2022. So then the last piece here is like, okay, I've got all this categorized. Now what is the next step? So the next step is to actually leveraging the data. The way that we have it sort of documented in our help center, the easiest way to kind of get insights about, you know, line item deduction sort of reporting or it's specific amounts for certain categories is by year. And so if you'll get this in your resources email tomorrow, but there's a help article about how to add year data to your tiller spreadsheet. And this just makes it easy to filter the data based on what year did the transaction occur in. And so the steps are documented here, but briefly just to demo, I'm going to go ahead and copy this formula. And then I'm going to add a year column outright. So once again, that's just making sure I know what I'm doing. So I'm actually going to turn the filter off first. So in row 1 here in Google Sheets, I'm going to add this array formula, which is documented in our help center. And I'm going to reformat this as plain text. So now I get the year. So now I've got, for all those 2022 transactions, I've got the year data. In Excel, very similar. Outright here, first available column, I'm just going to type the word year. It's going to add that column to the Excel table, which is really important. That's why we add it in the first available column to the right. And then this is a really simple formula. I'm going to go back to Excel here, and I'm just going to add it into the formula bar here in this first row. And then it just pre-populates the same formula in every row below it. And that is just a function of the Excel table. And that's why Excel tables are powerful. All right, so we've got the year data in there. So now we can actually start to build some analysis on our data. So the simplest way to build analysis about your 2022 data for tax reporting is to build a pivot table. And this is the capability that is available to both platforms. It's built right into Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel. You don't have to do anything extra. It's already available right in the spreadsheet within its native capabilities. So to build a pivot table in Google Sheets for the year, we are going to select all the data in the transaction sheet. So once again, this rectangle above row 1 to the left of column A. If you click on it, it's going to select all the data in your transaction sheet. And then in the insert menu here at the top of the Google Sheet, we'll choose pivot table. And then we're just going to have it create a new sheet for us. It'll be a new tab along the bottom. And then for the rows, we're going to click add, and we're going to choose category. For the columns, we're going to choose year. For the values, we're going to choose amount, and we want to make sure it's the sum, summarized by the sum. And then last, we're going to add a filter, and we're going to filter it by year, and we're going to only show 2022. So now we've got the total amount for 2022 for each category. This empty one here is because there's some data in the transaction sheet that's not categorized yet. So that's why those cells are blank. So it's giving us the amount for blank. Once you've categorized all your data for 2022, you shouldn't see a blank item here at the top. Now, if we need to only report on the amounts for specific categories, because those are the tax deductible ones, then we can add an additional filter here under the filters and choose category. Right now it's set to show all items. We're going to clear that. So it's going to uncheck everything. And then we're just going to look at donations, auto and gas, utilities, and travel. Maybe these are the ones that we can actually deduct in our taxes. It's going to be different for you depending on your financial situation. So you can filter them based on whatever items you actually need to track for tax purposes. And so, let's say half of my auto and gas is deductible. All my donations are deductible. Maybe this travel is for, I'm freelance or self-employed, and I can deduct some of my travel expenses. Same thing for my utilities. If I work from home, maybe a certain portion of my utilities goes towards I can deduct on my taxes as a self-employed person. Those are just some examples, but like I said, it's going to vary. So kind of backing up just a little bit, you set up your categories here in the category sheet. I've done this demo and like assumed that you're all set up in your foundation template and you've got some data categorized, you've got your categories set up. If for some reason you need to change anything, you can definitely add categories here. So, you know, let's say, you know, we have like a supplies category, and this is like for business group and it's an expense. That's another one as we go through and we categorize transactions as supplies that we can update in the pivot table to include in our filter. I don't have anything categorized as supplies right now, but if I did, I could go here and I can have it filter on the supplies and get that one pulled in as well. So in Microsoft Excel, similar steps, we can go here and same thing, this little square above row 1 and to the left of column A, that's going to select all the data for us. We can choose to insert a pivot table. Once again, that's on the insert ribbon, pivot table here. I'd like to have it in a new worksheet. I'm going to click OK. Now, I will admit, Excel, I'm way better in Google Sheets than Excel, and I was playing around with this morning and Excel pivot tables kind of mystify me a little bit, but I've got this. I got it worked out to where I think it will make sense here. So category, we're going to drag that into the rows, very similar to Google Sheets. We're going to use the year for our columns. Once again, same as we did in Google Sheets. I'm just dragging and dropping these into the appropriate place. And then the amount is going to go into values. And so same thing, we get the 2 different columns. So then if I add a filter, 2 different columns for 2022 and 2023. So if I add a filter here, then I can just filter on 2022, and then I get those sum amounts. The thing that I wasn't sure about was like why I have a blank here and then I have blank here. That was the thing that I couldn't really run down. So maybe there's some Excel gurus out there that understand why it's showing that way. But I also didn't categorize everything. And so if I categorize everything, maybe they'd both go away. I'm not sure. But anyhow, so this is the same kind of thing. And I can add an additional filter on the, oops, no, we already got that there, here. And then I can just filter to the specific ones that I want. So it is a little bit different than in Google Sheets. And like I said, I'm not like an Excel pivot table pro. So maybe there's a better way to visualize it that's more similar to the way Google Sheets does it. Let's see if I just try choose donations. So then it just kind of gives me like multiple items. It's not as useful. So I think the easier way is to not filter by the category column and just keep it filtered by year. Then now it's doing, there we go. So then you can just kind of tally these up. All right, so I think that was everything I had as far as the demo goes. So we can go ahead and start taking some of these questions. Looks like we've already got 17 open Q&A questions. If you have a question, please get it in the Q&A and I'll be happy to answer it. Or if you have feedback or understand Excel pivot tables better, please chime in. All right, so Mary asks, has anyone had a template to designate Amazon purchases by category, or would you do it the same way as you're showing for downloading transactions, then wipe out the Amazon transactions that automatically showed up from credit cards? That's a great question. We don't have a template specific to Amazon. There is a community solution for Amazon line item detail. It's not something I can demo in this webinar. You can definitely check it out in the community. There's great help content about it. It is a little bit complex. I will just caveat it with that, but there is a way to get that Amazon line item detail in there. And I think it automatically nets out the actual like purchases of Amazon that come through on the credit card. So it has a way to kind of like identify those and reconcile them in some way. So hopefully that helps. All right, Charles asked, will this webinar be available via replay? Yes, you will get an email tomorrow with a link to resources that include the replay of this video. All right, Stephen asks, when you paste in Excel, there's a clipboard at the bottom right corner of the paste area to select paste values only. Yeah, I think that is probably something I need to just explore more about how to paste in Excel. Thanks for that tip, Stephen. Okay. Someone says you're missing category from import data. Oh, okay, thank you. That was someone trying to tip me off that when I pasted it, I was going to be doing it wrong. Thank you. Okay. Maybe it'll work if you add a 0 to category column before you paste in Google Sheets as a placeholder. Probably some other tip. Thanks, Roger. Not sure about that one, but we did make it through the demo. Let's see. Someone says they need to leave and follow up on the recording. Can you show the easiest way of how to balance the checkbook transactions? I've done this in QuickBooks and trying to figure out a way that shows unbalanced transaction in the month. That's a great question, Dwayne. Don't have a great workflow for that, and it's not something I can demo in this specific webinar, but definitely recommend either searching in the Tiller community or posting a question in the Tiller community to see how other folks are doing this. We have a lot of folks that came from Quicken, and I'm sure somebody that's savvy out there has figured it out. So great question. All right. Diana asks, I missed the reference to which help article you're referring to. Will you send out or share the link? Yes. So in the resources that you'll get tomorrow via email, you'll have a link to a help article that's going to detail how to manually import your data, basically that copy paste process that I went through where you're, cleaning up columns, removing unneeded columns from an export that you get from your bank, and then pasting them in. And the steps are very detailed and should kind of get you through all the snafus that I maybe experienced. So you'll get that. You'll also get a help article that talks through how to add the year column to your transaction sheet. And then I'll just send the basic help article that's kind of going through a lot of the content I'm sharing here about how to organize for tax time. There are some additional resources available if you're using Google Sheets that are available in the Community Solutions add-on. I'm specifically not demoing those in this webinar because they're not available for Microsoft Excel yet. And so I wanted the demo to be available for whatever platform you're using. You can use the steps, but the resources will include more information about those options as well. All right, so Shalom asks, will I be able to rewatch the first part after the session completes? Yes, you will get a resource email tomorrow with a link to the video. Roger asks, how do you know the date format is correct for Tiller processing? From other Tiller help videos, it looks like there's a particular date format formula. Okay, sounds like that was the month column you were talking about, and you figured that out. Thank you, Roger, for the follow-up on that. Robin asks, would you talk more about categories and taxes? Yeah, so obviously the categories that you're using are going to vary by your situation, right? So I always default to Google Sheets because I'm just most comfortable in Google Sheets. So I'll just talk through it in the Google Sheets version, but very similar in Microsoft Excel, same steps for modifying your categories. But essentially, when you start in the foundation template, we give you a set of just example categories. And for any of these, you can overwrite the existing ones. So you don't have to use our categories. You can totally customize this. Override existing ones, add new ones to the bottom of the list, like I did for supplies, right? And so this is really one of the first steps for getting set up with Tiller. It's, once you've got the data filled into your sheet, it's our recommended next step is to spend time thinking about your categories, your category group structure. And so I didn't go through those steps because I'm just assuming that you've already done that. But as you're thinking about your taxes and how you need to categorize things, you may need to rethink your categorizations or the categories that you're using if your accountant requests specific information and maybe you did it differently to begin with. It's not difficult to change a category once you have already categorized transactions. And so let's just say this is phone now. And so I've changed this. But I've already got transactions categorized that are going to be having used that phone category, the cell phone category. So now they're invalid. And a really, really easy way to change this is to just use the find and replace. So I'm just selecting the column, and then you can click that little ellipsis, or you can also do edit. Is it here? Yes, edit, find, and replace. And so I can find cell phone and I can replace with phone. And I'm just going to do this specific range that I have selected, and I can say replace all. And then I've easily fixed all those broken categories that when I change it from cell phone to just phone. So that's, don't get caught up if you have to recategorize things like that's, or you change the category names or whatever, like that's totally fine, easily adjusted in your transaction sheet. Now, if the question was related to specific categories you should use for tax reporting, that's not really something I can advise on. Your accountant should be able to let you know like how you need to sort of organize your data depending on whatever type of reporting you need to do. If it's a small business or, it's just sort of, you do have, instead of taking the standard deduction, like you have a specific deduction based on your situation. So I would definitely recommend talking to an accountant or a tax advisor. All right, so Stephen asks, that was a tip, not a question. Another tip for pasting is to copy the header row from the tiller sheet into a staging sheet to paste new data for import. This way I can paste column by column if the source data has a different order. Then once the new data is gathering into the staging sheet, custom paste into the tiller sheet. Yes, absolutely. That's another way that you can stage it before you copy paste. I mean, the main thing, and you can just even individually copy and paste one column at a time. The main thing is just that when you're pasting, you're getting the data in the right column. So that's the biggest thing with the copy paste. All right. Karen says, I don't have the extensions menu item. If you're using Google Sheets, Karen, it should be up here at the top, extensions. If you're not seeing it there, are you seeing the rest of the menu items here or not? Because sometimes if you see this little triangle arrow thing, it's this like show menu option here. And sometimes if you click that, it's going to hide all this stuff and just give you this kind of toolbar. So if this is more what yours looks like, then you just need to click this little arrow in the top right here. Or I guess you can press, let's try this, Control-Shift-F. No, that didn't work. Maybe this one. Yeah, Control, not Command. Sorry, I'm on a Mac. Control-Shift-F will show and hide that. Hopefully that helps. Okay. You have several duplicate entries. Can you just delete the duplicate rows? Yes, you can delete the duplicate rows. Why there are duplicate entries, I'm not sure. It probably was in that Excel sheet. I did notice some of those. It probably was an error with my preparation for the demo, more so than like actually getting duplicates from the feeds. All right, let's see here. Kent says, can you just filter the date column versus adding a year column? Yes, you can. I mean, the date column, the filtering is going to be a lot more of a pain here because you have so many dates. So I don't actually recommend that. Like if I added, let's say I took away the year filter and I added the date column as a filter. I mean, you can see I have like probably thousands, not thousands, but 365 is the appropriate amount or more because now I have 2023 dates in here. So I don't recommend filtering on the date column. I think that would be too time consuming. You could do month as well. Is another shorter way, but then you have to add the month data to the manual data that you're preparing before you paste it in. And so that's why I just use year, because when you're doing your tax reporting, like you're just looking at last year. So you just need to look at the data from 2022. All right. Uncategorized will be the blanks. Yeah, I mean, that's what I figured, but what I didn't get, and this was from an anonymous person, but I see the blank here, but then there's also just this one that says blank. So why is it coming up as two separate blanks? That was what I didn't understand about the Excel pivot table. So maybe someone has the answer on that. Let's see. How do we graph from here? Can you elaborate on that, Roger? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Your question about how do we graph from here? All right. How do you subcategorize in Tiller? So this is a good question. So Google Sheets, either way, I mean, there's no we don't have a really a subcategory concept in Tiller. You can add an additional column to, you can call it subcategory. I would recommend using a tags column, because in Google Sheets specifically, there are some community solutions that support a tags column and to help you report on tags. And that would sort of be your next level of granularity for your data and your reporting. Same thing in Microsoft Excel. You can add a tags column to your transaction sheet for another layer of granularity in your reporting. There aren't any that I'm aware of. There aren't any community built solutions for tags, and tags aren't a supported solution in the foundation template out of the box. We don't have any reports available on tags, but that's the way that I would recommend it. The other thing to keep in mind is that, we've structured the category sheet with the group being the bigger bucket, and then the individual categories falling into that bucket. And so you can see I have this discretionary group, and then I have a number of categories that fall into that discretionary bucket. And so that's the way we kind of think about the hierarchy of groups and categories rather than category subcategory. So maybe that also helps answer that question. All right. Next question here is from James. Is it possible to download the demo video to refresh my memory a year from now? I will be posting this video on YouTube, and so you'll have a link to it that you can access at any point. It won't go away from YouTube for quite a long time, if ever. Generally, the only reason we take videos off YouTube or if they just get way too out of date from what the product actually looks like, and then at that point we would redo the video or redo the webinar. So you should have access to this. All right. So can we use P&L reports from Tiller for tax filing rather than using pivot tables? So we don't have any P&L tools out of the box for either platform. There is a P&L tool available in the Tiller Community Solutions add-on for Google Sheets, and you can absolutely use that for your tax filing. It's not something I'm demoing today because we don't have it. It's not available for Microsoft Excel. And so I chose the pivot table demonstration because that's built into the spreadsheet by default in both Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel. The pivot table could serve as a P&L if you did based on monthly reporting. The layout's a little bit different, but essentially it will give you your net if you remove the transfer type categories out of it. So hopefully that helps. But if you're interested in the P&L reports, the resource that I'll send for Google Sheets, the resource that I'll send tomorrow will include more details on how to access that. All right, Steve asks, is using a pivot table preferable to just using the yearly budget tab? Is it just more flexible due to the filter? That's a great question. You can totally use the yearly budget tab. If that is built in and easy enough for you, and there's not a lot of categories necessarily that you need to include in your deductions, then you can absolutely use that. It's built in, no extra work. All you have to do is make sure everything's categorized and that you have all the data for the year. The pivot table is more flexible because you can set up the filter. So if you have a number of items and it's just easier to kind of filter out everything else that you don't need to see for your deduction reporting, then I think it's just a little bit easier because of that filtering capability. All right, Robin asks, can you export from Quicken or QuickBooks? We don't have exports. Well, okay, so yes, you can export from both Quicken and QuickBooks. I don't have any, there is a blog post, I believe, about the steps for exporting from Quicken. I don't have steps documented for exporting from QuickBooks. We don't have any automation for importing into our platform for exports from either of those. It would be the same manual, copy paste kind of steps. All right, Diana asks, should the results of the pivot table for 2022 be the same as the yearly budget and actual summary? If they are not, any idea why not? They can be different if you don't filter out transfers or hidden categories, because the monthly and yearly budget in both versions, Google Sheets and Excel, they're ignoring transfer type categories. So on the category sheet here, any category that has the type set as transfer, which are most commonly like credit card payments, those are not going to show up on the yearly budget or monthly budget by default, simply because they shouldn't be affecting your cash flow or your budget. They're just basically things that are hidden. The yearly budget and monthly budget are also not going to display any categories that are marked as hide from reports. And so if in your pivot table, you don't filter out the transfers and you don't filter out the ones that are marked as hide from reports, because the pivot table is not going to do that automatically, then your totals would be different. Yes. All right. Gina asks, will you go over tagging in the reports you can generate with them that help with tax time using that option? It seems there are two different tagging options in categories and transactions that do not correspond to each other. I can speak briefly to this. It's really specific to Google Sheets though, because we don't have there's no community built solutions for tags for Microsoft Excel. And so basically what Gina is referring to is in the Tiller Community Solutions add-on, there is a tags report, which leverages the tags column in the transaction sheet. And B, there is a category roll-up report. Category roll-up report that can leverage a tags column if it is in the category sheet. And so the advantage of adding a tags column to the category sheet in Google Sheets and using that category roll-up report is that you can generate the report for a specific tag. And so you add the tag column. I think it's probably better if we add it to the right of the group. And because I know what I'm doing, I'm just going to say, okay. And so you can say tags, and then maybe like, this travel one is like tax. And then in the category roll-up report, I can then just filter and have the report only run against transactions that are using categories that are tagged with tax. And so it's like at this higher level of tagging at the category level, so that you don't have to go through and tag each individual transaction as well. So everything that I had marked here as travel would automatically get the tax tag because the category itself is tagged. I'm not going to demo the reports just because that's a little bit out of the scope of this demo, but that sort of hopefully explains the differences between why you might have a tag column in the transaction sheet versus the category sheet in the context of those reports. All right, so let's see here. Diana says, also when I add transactions manually and later want to filter by 2022 transactions, do I need the month and week? Does the year data auto-populate based on the transaction date only? I'm trying to troubleshoot why the year column isn't populating. It seems related to the manually added transactions. The year column should populate even if you don't have the month and week data in there. So as long as you're just trying to build your pivot table or filter on the year column, then you don't need to add the month and year data to those manual transactions. If it's not auto-populating, it's going to probably depend on, so for Google Sheets, like as long as you have the date column in column B, because that's the default placement of it, the formulas are set up so that it should be trying to pull from the date column being in column B. Google Sheets should have no issues. So if it's Excel, I'm not exactly sure. We may need to probably troubleshoot offline. So I'd recommend just reaching out and support if you're still having issues with it. All right. Okay. So let's see here. Kirk says, well, I love pivot tables. I've actually found the expense category report from Cowboy 13 in the Tiller community to be extremely helpful, especially during tax time. He and I have modified this sheet and add a column to category sheet to include a tax group, which then allows easy filter of tax related items. Thanks for that feedback, Kurt. I definitely agree. There's a lot of great community options. It's awesome that you've worked with a community member to modify that. it sounds like you've got the tax group column in the categories sheet, which is very similar to the concept I was explaining about using tags. But that's awesome that you guys have customized Tiller and extended it. I always love to hear stories of that. Great, great option as well if you're using Google Sheets, it sounds like, and you didn't specify, but I'm guessing it's Google Sheets. I don't know. All right, Art says, would there be any benefit to adding a column called taxes and then placing a no or yes in the column as the date is entered? That way, at the end of the year, you could filter on tax data being, yes in that column. That's absolutely another way to do it. I think it adds additional work beyond just, knowing which categories are going to be deductible for taxes. If you have different transactions that you're categorizing with the same category, and some of them are deductible and some of them are not, that could be a reason to either break that out to have separate categories so that you don't need that extra column. But if that's your preference, you can absolutely do it that way. This was just one way to do it that's simple and built into the spreadsheet. All right, Karen asks, you can do subtotals in the pivot table tools. Okay, so I think you're trying to explain more about why I'm seeing the blank and the empty space. I'll have to look into that a bit more, but thanks for sharing that additional information, Karen. Right, let's see, Tina asked, can you do a demo how to bring in transactions for all of 2022 if they have not been bringing them in monthly? So that was the first part of the demo, exporting the data from your bank and then manually copying and pasting it into your transaction sheet. So if you missed that part of the demo, I definitely recommend looking out for the email tomorrow. You'll get a link to the resources where you can rewatch that part of the demo. You'll also get a link to a help article that'll explain all the steps for how to manually import that data that was missing in your sheet from 2022. Can I add columns anywhere in the foundation sheet or just at the end? So in Google Sheet, well, anywhere. So the thing about adding them to the end is that they're just kind of out of the way. You can really add them anywhere. Depending on, if you're using solutions built by community members, the way that they've built those solutions may or may not factor in that you might add a column in the middle of the transaction sheet. We do try to recommend that builders build solutions and use dynamic column references. So it doesn't matter if you insert. If you're not using any of those community solutions, then you shouldn't have to worry about that. So it's up to you. The only thing that is important with column placement is in Excel, and making sure that if you are going to add a column out to the right, that you use the next available column, just to ensure that it gets added to the table boundary. So you can see, like, before it's, this column, it doesn't have the alternating row colors. So that is an indication that's not in the Excel table boundary. But then if I just type in a header name for this first blank column, press enter, it automatically adds it to the table boundary, which is just important for filtering and sorting and that kind of stuff. So that's the only tip I have about placements. All right, it looks like I can take one more question before we need to wrap it up here, but the rest of the questions I will make sure to include in the Q&A portion of the resources that you'll get tomorrow. So if I didn't get a chance to answer your question live, I'll make sure that you get a written answer. So Roger says, on the Tiller website, there seem to be some pretty graphs based on categories. Are there any built-in graphs, or do I just have to build my own in Excel? No problem either way, just wanted to ensure I'm not missing something. Okay, that makes more sense. Thanks for clarifying, Roger. So out of the box in the foundation template, there are not a lot of visualizations. The main visualizations you get are on the insights sheet. You got a nice chart here. Monthly budget gives you some information about your cash flow and your spending actual, budget actual versus, spending income versus spending actual, budget income versus budget actual. If you want more graphs, you can definitely build them yourself. You can also look at the show and tell section under Microsoft Excel and the Tiller community. So if I can quickly go there now, that's not .tillerhq.com. Should get us to the right place. Yeah, so Microsoft Excel, show and tell section. There's like a category tracker. This has a nice pie chart here you can use. So there's some stuff you can add on top of your foundation template for Microsoft Excel that will give you some better visualizations that are available now in the community. Otherwise, you can build your own, and then you can share them in the show and tell section in the Tiller community. All right. That was the last question that I can take live here, but I'll definitely make sure to get some written answers over in the resources. So look out for that email from me tomorrow. You'll get a link to the video recording of the session, as well as some written resources. If for some reason you don't get the email, make sure you double check your spam, your junk folders, because sometimes it does end up in there. It should be an automated email about 12 p.m. Eastern time. It's usually 24 hours exactly after the webinar start time. If for some reason it's not showing up there, it will be just a link to resources on the Tiller community. So you can always just go to the community and find it that way as well. All right. Thanks so much, y'all, for joining me today. I hope y'all have a great rest of your week and weekend, and good luck getting all your data prepped for tax time. Have a good one. Bye.